Welcome to yet another episode of Shortcast Over Coffee. Today, my guest is Pranav Radhakrishnan. Pranav is a terrific science communicator and the man behind the popular YouTube channel Science is Dope, where he talks about pseudoscience and some people who popularize it and analyzes conspiracy theorists who are getting popular day by day, unfortunately. Pranav is an engineering graduate from the National Institute of Technology, Calicut, and I found out that he also grew up in Kozhikode, the very city where I did a lot of schooling in. In this episode, I talked to Pranav about atheism, debunking pseudoscience, alternative medicine, and, of course, Sadhguru. So, without further ado, let's now get right into it. Hi, Pranav. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm interviewing Science is Dope. I was so delighted to come across your channel, to be honest, because it basically spoke a lot of what I wanted to speak,
Mm,
and I spoke among my friends, but it
mm,
was great to see someone being really bold and not mincing words and
mm.
debunking a lot of pseudoscience and a lot of what we are seeing out in YouTube and social media, which we will eventually get into. But to start off the podcast, I would love to know what Science is Dope is all about and what you were up to before you started your YouTube channel.
Yeah, like you said, I think many people have the same sentiments. These are things that they wanted to say, and to hear someone else say it, hear someone give voice to their thoughts. I think that's one reason why people are subscribed to my channel. That's one reason for my growth also. And to be honest, I would have been one among those people. I would have wanted to see someone actually say these things online. But in India, especially, such content is impossible to come by. Like when I started, I couldn't see anyone else doing what I did, and one main reason why I did it was because I didn't see anyone else doing it. And initially, though my channel, I started the whole thing as a science channel. Like I wanted to talk about topics within science because I come from a science background. I wanted to talk about things like the physics of sound and the biology of evolution, basically general topics under science, and such topics, such videos weren't getting a lot of traction, especially in India. And the one video I did where I did touch upon pseudoscience a little bit got a lot of views. When I say a lot, I mean like 1K, 2K at that time. And um so I thought, yeah, there is an audience for these kinds of topics. And this is a topic that no one else is speaking on. And I was very interested in this. I used to watch a lot of content of creators outside India who talk about all these topics about logic and about fallacies and about pseudoscience and all these things. And I thought, okay, why not do some more videos on the topic? And I did such videos where in between I would bring in whatever science topic that is relevant to this idea being discussed in the video. And I'd try and call out all the pseudoscience also, all the fallacies being made also. And those kinds of videos got really popular. And I remember there was this one video I did on Sadhguru, who's getting extremely popular now on YouTube, especially. And that video did really well. In fact, that's the most watched videos, second most watched video on my channel now. And many people even discovered my channel through that video. So, yeah, once I started doing such topics, there was no looking back. And today, more than science, much more than science, I do topics on rationality. Yeah, and rational thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So, you said you wanted to start off as a science channel. We have the classic case of someone like a Mark Rober, Veritasium, Vsauce. Was that kind of the line that you were looking to target?
Yep, those were my inspirations. Those channels were the ones I wanted to be like, kind of. And even today, you can see. If you look at any of my videos that do a pure science topic, like I've done topics like why does the moon or the moon doesn't actually revolve around the earth, why is this, things like those are pure science topics. Like I've done one video on the evolution of the telescope. Those topics are pure science, and if you watch them, you will see that the pattern of the videos is kind of similar to people like Veritasium, and yeah, so they're my inspirations.
Excellent. You mentioned that you were watching some of the pseudoscience debunkers from outside India. Do you want to name a few?
Yeah. So the first one that comes off the top of my head is Rationality Rules. He's a UK based YouTuber, mainly talks on religion and such topics, but he also talks on pseudoscience. And he breaks down arguments or points made by people by exposing what logical fallacies are being committed. So, in fact, I learned a lot of my fallacies from watching him. And then I would say there are people like Professor Dave, then people like there's a channel called Simon Dan, if you've heard of him. He also debunks a lot of flat Earth arguments and things like that, conspiracy theories. Yeah, these are some of the few. There are a bunch more, but yeah, these are the few. Mainly channels that do debates, arguments, or break down arguments and debates and stuff. So those are the channels.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned about flat Earth theory. I don't even know if I can call it that, but it's crazy the number of people who believe in
Yeah.
that kind of stuff even now. I mean, I went to grad school in Virginia Tech, and Virginia comes under the so-called Bible Belt, if you will.
Oh,
It's
yeah, I remember.
southern state. Well, I
Is
mean,
Virginia a southern state?
yeah, it was one of the
Oh, I
Confederate
didn't know
states.
this.
Yeah,
Okay.
funnily enough, Virginia is a state of great contrasts. So Virginia starts right below DC, and it goes all
Okay.
the way till about North Carolina. I think that's the state
Okay.
that
Okay.
comes right below.
Okay.
So the counties that are close to DC are extremely wealthy. The 5-6 counties surrounding DC have one of the highest per capita income in the US because of defense contractors, people working for the CIA, NASA, and all of that. And then the bordering counties, which border like West Virginia, they are, you can still see Confederate flags. You can still see the remnants of the coal industry and so on and so forth. And funnily enough, I was a teaching assistant during my first year, and I met someone who had enrolled for an aerospace degree and did not believe in evolution. So um, it was absolutely fascinating. Yeah, so I discovered it pretty late that you have this notion that people in the West, um, coming from India, right? I mean, you
So,
just
uh, I think you can say a lot of what you said for people who don't believe in vaccines. So, I think some of these beliefs that people have come out of privilege. They've experienced the privilege of not having such deadly diseases rampaging through their societies for so many years, or even things like flat earth, like their problems are so few and far between that things like evolution. So all these ideas to some degree come from religious or magical thinking. That's what I like to call it. So I think they also come out of privilege. So, anti-vax especially, they've not had these diseases for such a long time in their societies that they kind of forget the role science and vaccines had to play in bringing them to that state in their society. And that privilege makes them question the very few side effects that vaccines or uh, uh, let's say flat earth, they usually bring in government control and all these things, right? NASA's fooling you, that's what they say. And even evolution. Some conspiracy theorists uh, try and bring an idea of these scientists are trying to, they're organizing a conspiracy to fool all of you, and that's what they say. So I think they wouldn't say this in a place where there isn't that same level of privilege, which is what you can see in India. So although India is not like a backward nation by any sense of the word, it's still not nearly as privileged as some of the Western nations. And so you will hardly ever find anyone saying anything against vaccines here in this country. And I think privilege has one of the biggest roles to play in that.
Yeah, you bring an interesting point because I mean, look at the average life expectancy, right? 1947, I think it was about high 30s maybe, and now it's around 75, 76. So
Yeah.
we are definitely privileged to be living in this day and age where
Yeah,
vaccines have
but
played.
1940s is a bad sample because that's when the World Wars happened. If you, I think, if you
No, I
look
was
at,
talking about the average life expectancy in India. Uh,
oh, in India,
yeah.
okay, yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, to your point, that's a
yeah,
bad thing because
so, yeah,
45 was when the World War ended. But
yeah,
even if you take something like the 50s or the early boomer generation, we have come a long way from that point thanks
yeah,
to
true,
vaccines. So
true.
yeah, completely concur to your point that people always look at that minute number in efficacy, which is gone wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of happening in India where people are starting to ignore modern medicine, even though all these benefits and positives about life expectancy and everything came out of modern medicine, came because of modern medicine. There is a tendency now that you can see on social media, and I call this out a lot, where people are starting to ignore or move away from modern medicine and in favor of traditional medicine. So and these are all alternative medicines. In fact, there is an entire ministry that the Indian government has set up just for promoting alternative medicines in society. So uh, I think again, all that comes out of privilege. We wouldn't have that in a society that uh, that has a lot of epidemics, pandemics, or people die often. Children die of polio. Children are permanently disabled because of polio. You would never have that in a society like that.
Yeah, interesting. You bring about the topic of Ministry of Ayush, right? And I have members of my own family where they want to try homeopathy, they want to try Ayurveda, and you mentioned privilege as well, which makes me think that is it the confidence that even if that doesn't work out, I can always bank on modern medicine? Is that one of the reasons why people want to try out these things?
I think it's a lack of trust in modern medicine. That has a much bigger role to play in these decisions people make. I think people lack trust because modern medicine, or at least even the doctors, they don't do a good job of communicating one on one to their patients. You can't entirely blame them because maybe they're also busy with a lot of patients to see in a short amount of time, that they can't dedicate enough time to talk to a patient about, hey, this is what's wrong with you, and this is the way we are going to treat it. This is going to be our approach. It is known to have this level of efficacy. It's known to have worked in this many people. All these things. If this kind of communication is there from doctor to patient, alternative medicine will vanish, because people will understand that this is how you judge the efficacy of a medicine. That's not there among actual medical doctors. Instead, what happens is the uh, alternative medicine doctors spend more time talking to the patient. They kind of feel cared for, like when a homeopath sits with you and listens to your entire life story. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but they'll talk about a lot of patient history with them. And if it's some lifestyle disease, some diet or something, I think they can treat it themselves. But the amount of time that they spend with the patient is something that contributes to the amount of trust people have in such medicines. And I don't think patients think about, even if this doesn't work, you can fall back on modern medicine. Patients don't think that way, but the way they think about medicine is so distorted by the existence and the promotion and this thing about I said about communicating, and there's also communication in the sense a lot of people promoting modern medicine, alternative medicine, especially on social media, talk a lot of uh, talk a lot of shit, for lack of a better term, about modern medicine. They try and say things like, hey, modern medicine's all chemicals, they have all these side effects, and they basically turn people away from modern medicine. So it's a combination of all these things that end up in modern medicine being looked at unfavorably, and alternative medicine getting all this promotion. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about the efficacy of modern medicines, right? Like even if it's a vaccine or something. But the same numbers don't really come out when it comes to Ayurveda or homeopathy. And I don't remember people ever asking for those numbers. Like, why would that be? Um,
So, as humans, we don't pay much importance to statistical evidence, whereas that is the measure of efficacy of a medicine. You should have medicine that has gone through proper randomized control trials, having all these efficacy and numbers and all these things, and based on that you should make a decision on, hey, this medicine is the most effective for this condition and not this one. Instead, we tend to think in a fallacious manner by looking at anecdotal evidence. So, one person says that, hey, going to this doctor really helped me. I had this pain over here, and now after going to him, it's completely gone. And people hear that, and that gives a much more impact, or plays a much bigger role in their minds. Things like these anecdotal evidence and things like what people say, this they have a bias towards things like recency, availability, things like what people say, like authority, like uh, these are all fallacious ways of thinking. Anecdotal evidence is another one. So people give a greater importance to all these things rather than statistical evidence, which is what modern medicine works on. So, and a lot of these fallacious thought processes are something that evolved as a trait in us. Like, imagine like 100,000 years back, the Homo sapiens that existed back then never had to deal with such high levels of statistics and all that. Most of what they dealt with are all anecdotal, are all hearsay. Like he said this, she said that, things like that. And even today, we've not evolved at all from how Homo sapiens were back 100,000 years ago. So we still tend to pay more importance to thought process like that. So yeah, that is
Hmm.
the main reason.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the lobby of alternative medicine is quite huge. I mean, it can be pretty much compared to the sugar lobby in America in the 1950s and 60s, and fighting against that seems to be quite an uphill task. I mean, we all saw what happened with Dr. Abby Phillips recently,
Yeah.
with Himalaya and all of that. It's crazy that we have to fight for these things at this day and age.
Yeah, I think it'll benefit people who are not aware to actually talk about what exactly happened. So Dr. Abby Phillips is a hepatologist from Kerala, who's mainly active on Twitter, and he provides a lot of chemical analyses, and he tweets about the actual reports on these things, and he provides you the test results you can see yourself. And he calls out a lot of alternative medicines, he does chemical analyses and all these, mainly because he also gets a lot of patients who have liver damage only because they had alternative medicines. People who would have been otherwise completely healthy were harmed by these, especially Ayurveda. I think this is one reason why I called out Ayurveda. People don't see the uh, actual danger in having untested, unsafe, not safety tested medicines like Ayurveda. So recently, what happened was he made a tweet. This was a couple of months back, I think. He made a tweet against this Ayurveda company, this huge Ayurveda company called Himalaya, made a tweet providing all evidence against this one medicine, and he got sued. And the company demanded that his Twitter account be removed. And he is actually one of the few people that actually is knows what he's talking about, is really qualified in this area and focuses on this area. And to have his entire Twitter account removed is a huge blow to science communication all over the country. And now he actually fought the lawsuit back, and he got a stay order from a higher court against this lawsuit issued by Himalaya. And today's Twitter account is back. But you can see how there is, like you said, there is an uphill fight for all these, for any science communicator that's trying to call out this kind of bad medicine and all this. So this is one example of one thing that happened. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm glad he got it back, and it was very heartening to see the level of support that he got on Twitter,
Yeah. I
including
think
yourself. Yeah.
many people were even willing to contribute financially to actually fighting the company. So yeah, I'm so This is one of the things that makes me optimistic about pseudoscience in this country. Although, even though it's in a bad state right now, all over social media, it's in like you have all these creators, uh, uh, spouting ideas that have no evidential basis for them. Uh, I'm optimistic because there are people who see the value in all this, who are on the side of evidence, and those people are so like the bravery of the communicators is something that inspires them to support these people even financially. And like a little bit of rational thinking is all people need to think through the bullshit that they themselves see. So, because of all these reasons, I'm optimistic, even though we have a bad state of citizens in this
Yeah,
country.
it's good that we are seeing minor deltas, minor improvements. But I think
Yeah.
every step in the right direction should be encouraged. You mentioned about rational thinking, right? And I've had this thought for the longest time where rational thinking is very difficult to interpret in the sense that people can be rational in some areas but
Mm,
irrational in others, and it's
mm,
very nuanced. They may look for the absolute evidence in some
mm,
cases, whereas
mm,
in some other cases they may be like, it's okay, why not?
mm,
And Obviously there is a lot of link with religion. How do
mm.
you see it? Can someone be rational all the time, or are just human beings very layered in the sense that they can be quite hypocritical at times?
So, yes, I do think someone can be rational with the important decisions in their lives. I don't think humans by nature are rational creatures. We are far more emotional than rational, and emotions are important. It's what helps you, or it's what enables you to appreciate art and music and beauty and emotions of being with people you love. All that is important for a person. But for important decisions in their life, thinking rationally is important. And I do believe that people can be rational consistently with all such decisions. And for me personally, I did fall to some irrational, let's say, even superstitions at different points in my life. And once I actually thought through that, or saw reasons why um, it's not useful to believe all these things. Like, I'll give you an example. So there is this thing called stock market. This is completely non-religious pseudoscience. I forgot. There's a name for it. It's called. Uh, it's a kind of reading the graph of a particular uh, uh, stock or even cryptocurrency. So, judging by the shape of the graph, whether it's going up or whether it has taken this pattern, I remember there's this pattern called the head and shoulders pattern. So, apparently, it looks like the graph looks like a person's head and their shoulders. So, based on the shape of the graph, uh, you can predict, or they claim that the graph is going to go up or go down, and based on that you should make decisions of buying or selling. And once I realized it's complete pseudoscience, it took me some external force to actually come to this realization. I had to see people actually talk about how fraudulent this whole idea is. And once I saw through that, I was able to think more rationally in these areas. And I think that's what a lot of people need. If they get someone telling them that, hey, these ideas are irrational and this is why, I think people can start being more rational in decisions they make or in beliefs they hold. So, there was another part to your question I forgot. Can you
Yeah,
ask
yeah.
that again?
I what I wanted to know was, can people be rational at all times, and
Yeah.
are people, usually quite hypocritical, right? When something happens to them, they sort of change their minds and start to think in a very irrational way. So,
Yeah,
you know,
so I think it's far more important to be skeptical and to question everything that they come across, all the ideas that they come across. And that's something I teach in my videos or I talk about in my videos. And I think when people start adopting that sort of skeptical attitude, they can be consistently rational in all their decisions. And another thing that you spoke about is the tone of communicating with someone. If you want to give them the best chance of making a rational decision or rational belief about something, I think it's important to speak in a tone that doesn't feel like you're attacking them or calling them stupid or condescending at them. Because I think when you do any of those, they instantly have their defenses up and they'll go into a state where they're more concerned with defending their beliefs or proving or showing that they're not stupid. And this hinders actually you getting through to them and actually conveying your message or what you actually want to tell them. And I think it's important, and I only realized this midway through my YouTube journey. So now my videos are more concerned with actually being a little more toned down, non aggressive in what I try to say. And yeah, I think once people are in a state where they can take in your message, yeah, I think once they're convinced of whatever you're saying, I think they'll start being more rational. Yeah.
hmm. Yeah, you mentioned about, what, in a way, what makes us human, right? The emotions,
Yeah.
like how we appreciate music, how we appreciate dance, the little subtle nuances, because without which we will all be just AI or maybe
Robots.
robots. Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And that brings me to the thought about rituals, right? Rituals are a part of, India being such a nation of multitudes. Rituals are an integral part, and there are two ways to look at it: rituals from a religious standpoint versus rituals as a cultural identity. So I wanted to ask you, what is your take on rituals, and uh, is it really important for uh, someone who is an atheist or a free thinker to completely go against rituals? Because yeah, I think you get the point, right?
Yeah, I understand. So, I think very often, even though people in this generation might be more free thinking, more radical, and more rational in a lot of their thoughts, and they probably wouldn't believe in a lot of rituals. Oh, by the way, I think all rituals have some element of pseudoscience in them, whether they're religious or not. I don't need to give you examples of
Oh, there
religious
are so
rituals,
many. Yeah.
but yeah, there are non-religious ritualistic behaviors that people take part in. So things like when there's a rocket launch in NASA, apparently all astronauts are for every astronaut rocket launch, they apparently pee on the rocket, because apparently some astronaut in the 70s or something did that and ended up having a very successful mission. So now they do it for every mission to be successful, and they know that uh, it's not based in any concrete basis. They know it's a ritual that's superstitious, but they still do it. And sometimes, yeah, I do think these can be harmless, but and some part of us kind of has a tendency to engage in ritualistic behavior. I remember, even me personally, I would, like, before my exams, this was a long time ago when I was still in school and not really an atheist or anything. Just before my exam, I would go to the temple in a specific way. I would choose a specific route, pray at the temples in a particular order, things like this. And this was a ritual for me. Like, of course, there are rituals in the temple itself, but even outside the temple, I followed all these rituals because I thought they bring me good luck. And I think this is a human tendency, but just like those astronauts who recognize that this is superstitious, I think it's important to recognize when there is superstition and when it's not. And I think that will help people think rationally. And when it comes to an older generation, that's what I was starting this point with. But when it comes to an older generation, like your parents or whatever, I think it's futile to try and change their minds. It's more important to change the minds of people that are going to be alive for a much longer time. There's very little use in changing the minds of the older generation, because you can argue those are the people in power in governments. But for your parents, or your family, elders in your family, it's not as important to try and uh, change their minds. What people end up doing is they might argue and they might offend and end up completely ruining their relationship with these people. If you think that your relationship with these family members is more important than them changing their minds, then yes, of course, just avoid talking about these topics with them, because you're not gonna gain anything by changing their minds. It's another entirely different story if you're dependent on them, either financially or emotionally or whatever. But if you're financially independent, don't even bother talking to your family elders on these topics. If it's something that directly affects you, like if they're trying to impose their beliefs on you, just put your foot on and say no. I don't believe in all this. I'm not going to take part in this. That's all you have to do. If you're dependent on them, however, I would say try to. I think your most important goal should be try to gain independence, mainly financial. And once you have that, only can you stand up to them. Otherwise, you can't afford to break these relationships with them. So just work towards getting independent, and then like whatever I said earlier. But yeah, this is how I personally do it. I'm not sure if this is the only way of handling it, but this is how I handle it. This is how I tell others to handle it if they're faced with this similar situation. Yeah.
You bring a very interesting point about, not ruining relationships, and maybe a futile thing to change the generation past, right? I mean, the generation that is in their 60s and 70s, because they were children of their time. They have had some sort of a social conditioning. But have you had this instance where you already know that you are an atheist? I mean, you are pretty confident that you are an atheist, but there is a family gathering or there is some social gathering where there is someone of the earlier generation talking absolute garbage, and you are itching to be like, no, that is not true, but held back.
Yeah, there have been situations, and there have been times when I would interrupt and say, "Hey, this is all bullshit" or something. But now I know better because I think it's far more important if they're all older people and changing their minds might not really be of any use. I would just stay quiet most of the time. I do, or so I think there is this itch inside me that you talked about get satisfied because I get the opportunity to make videos and talk to people about these exact topics. So that satisfies the itch. So nowadays I don't really feel the need to interrupt an elder and do all these things. And I would say, yeah, do I would say a similar thing to anyone else who asks me that question. It's futile to talk to them and change their viewpoint. Uh, I will, however, say, you know
Yeah,
what? I
the
had a
reason the
point
reason
I forgot.
no,
Yeah.
it's okay. The reason why I asked about the itch thing, right, is because a lot of the times this conversation ends with isn't it? Or they will look at you eye to eye and be like,
Yeah, just I would say in such cases, just politely say, I don't think so. No,
"Hmm,
I don't think there's a way. Just don't be rude and attack them in the process, or don't be rude and say anything like, no, this is all bullshit. No, don't be like that. You can say exactly the same thing by being polite. Just say, no, I don't think so.
yeah.
Don't think this is the way. I would say, yeah, that's yeah,
Yeah,
how I
disagreeing
would
is
respond.
fine, but it also needs to come with a certain sense of civility,
Yeah.
is your point, and I think that makes complete sense. Pranav, I wanted to ask you that atheism is Lawrence Cross, Professor Lawrence Cross usually says that I am not an atheist, but I'm an anti-theist, which means he's absolutely against all gods and whatnot. So I've had this question in my mind, and I've been wanting to ask you and other fellow atheists that among the world's biggest problems, the problems seem to be mounting every day. Where does religion stand, and why is it so important to educate people? And yeah, so I mean, I'm just going to put religion and pseudoscience in the same bracket again.
Yeah. So, what you have to remember is that things like religion aren't isolated. It's the same kind of thinking that you see in religious uh, settings that leads to things like alternative medicine, things like astrology, things like uh, superstitious magical thinking, like people believing that some things happen through ways that you know like some things just happen, the universe makes them happen. I think there was some book where this idea was common. I think this guy Khaled Hosseini was the author. The book
Kite
was
runner,
called The Kite
thousands.
Runner.
Yeah, kite runner. Hmm.
Yeah. Um, so there was an
Oh,
idea
I
in
think
the
I think I think you're talking about Paulo Coelho, Alchemist,
yeah
right?
Paulo Coelho
Yeah, the
Alchemist.
universe
That's
conspires to. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. The universe conspires to get you the things that you want. No such thing happens. You have to work towards what you want. The universe doesn't hand them to you. Of course, you might turn out to be extremely lucky, and you might inherit a fortune, and things like that do happen. Of course, that's a statistical anomaly, but this because of because of that, it doesn't make sense to rely on that. What happens is people rely on these things. So I think all these things happen because of this same magical thinking rooted in religions. So in my channel also, I don't just address these pseudoscience elements. I also criticize religions in on my channel, and it's important for people to get out of that sort of thinking to actually help help themselves not fall into scams and uh, fraudulent products from these alternative medicine peddlers. So yeah, I think we have to reach a point where religions become irrelevant in our society, and I think the problem right now is people don't have good reasons, or the actual uh, thought process why they don't believe these things. I believe if we give them that, they're gonna start thinking for themselves, and uh, things like religion, all these superstitions, they'll all slowly become a little more irrelevant. They probably won't vanish, but they'll become irrelevant. And that's something I'm also fighting towards. Of course, it's a huge, long fight, and baby steps are the way to go. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what yeah.
yeah, absolutely. The reason why I brought up the rational in some cases, irrational in some cases is because of this, is that a lot of the people that I interact with, maybe, the usual temple goers, the people who celebrate Diwali, who will, do the Ganesh Chaturthi, make sweets and snacks and all of that. But when it comes to, medicine, or when it comes to, they are absolutely scientific. So, I mean, my question to you is, isn't that the majority of people? Or do you think that because they are slightly, tilted towards the religious aspect, it will only take one nudge before they divert onto alternative medicine, superstitiousness and all of that?
I don't know, but that maybe so it depends on the person. Depends on like you can only talk on a case by case basis. Most people, if you give them that nudge, they'll actually go. They'll actually discard all their religious beliefs. But some people, if you give that nudge, they might actually start believing in things like alternative medicine. But I think it's the most important thing is that people get the right information to make these decisions. And that's what I do on my channel. I tell them, hey, why it's wrong to think in this manner? What's the fallacious reasoning behind all this? And yeah, so I think you can't make a generalized statement for all people, but yeah, all these people are simply inconsistent with their beliefs. They have pseudoscientific beliefs in some aspects, but they don't in others. Ultimately, what they need is good reasons to believe or not believe some things. And when they find that, they will decide accordingly. Most people I've met who have rational beliefs in one setting but don't have them in others are tend to be rational people who will go looking for this information on their own, and if they find the right sort of information, they do tend to think rationally in those areas of irrationality also.
Hmm. Excellent. Now, I mean, we are both Indians, so it's important that we talk about India and Hinduism, of course. I've had this thought about Abrahamic religions or Semitic religions versus Hinduism. There's this common narrative that Hinduism is not really a religion, it's a way of life, and all of that. So, when, as an educator, as a science communicator, when you are educating people about pseudoscience, do you see any difference in the kind of population that believes in such things, if they are uh, of Abrahamic religions versus Hinduism? Has it been easy to communicate it with someone who is a Hindu versus Abrahamic religion, or is it all the same straight up?
I would say it's all the same. I don't really focus on religion. I tend to broaden into pseudoscience as a whole most of the time. But I do have friends of mine, other creators, who debate people on religion. So I do think it's very common that they get uh, Hindu people who will argue points like this, that Hinduism is not actually a religion. Uh, it's the tradition of the peoples in this geographical region and all that shit. But ultimately, you have to just think about. So, for me also, I just think of Hinduism as the lived reality of people in this country. Uh, like if they're filling a government form, they ask what the religion is, there might be a box for Hindu, and you'll tick that. That's what you do. You don't live your life going around like, hey, it's a way of life. What difference does that make in your life, right? Like you follow it the same way someone in the West might follow their Abrahamic faith. And yeah, in a lot of such respects, it's the same as an Abrahamic faith. But yeah, if you get into the philosophy of it and all these things, yeah, there are differences in the way the uh, in the philosophy of Vedanta and all that. uh, I don't really address these things on my channel, so I'm probably not the most expert person on all these topics. But yeah, if they want to talk about such topics, yeah, sure. But if they want to address Hinduism as not a religion, yeah, that's not really the lived reality of most people.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, recently I've been coming across people who are increasingly calling themselves spiritual as opposed to religious. Um, what is your take on that? Have you been able to completely figure out what spirituality is? Because I haven't.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has. I think people have an idea of what spiritual is, and they make decisions based on that. Like, hey, spiritual means you have to meditate a lot, and these are spiritual leaders. You follow them. You do these things. You do fasting. You eat in a particular way. You eat only particular foods. Um, you have these rituals in your day, all that stuff. So it's all a blanket of spirituality. There's no specific definition of spirituality. In fact, I even made fun of this whole idea in one of my videos on spirituality. But uh, in my opinion, it's just an extension of religious, because a lot of ideas simply have no basis for them. Like if someone believes in manifestation, that's a spiritual idea. There's literally no basis for it. If people want to say something is actually true, then there has to be some basis. And if it's an empirical claim, it has to be an evidential basis for it. So that's my opinion. It's again another kind of bullshit, in my opinion.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
it's
As you
just a
speak,
bunch of ideas with no basis. Yeah.
yeah, as you speak, I see the picture behind you. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Talking about this, once you zoom in, I'll take my camera.
Yeah, Carl Sagan, the famous author. Excellent. I think that completely makes sense. I mean, I've never been able to understand what spirituality actually is, and never been able to. Yeah, it's something like fourth dimension or fifth dimension. Like I've never been able to completely understand.
So
And
the thing is, for many people, they experience benefits from spirituality. Like maybe it's their meditation activity or whatever. And if I'm honest, these benefits can also be attained by other means, like something secular. Like I think mindfulness meditation gives you the same results. People like Sadhguru, I mentioned him before, they do actual studies on benefits on blood markers of people who underwent their course. Um, it's all fraudulent studies. In fact, I even looked at them in one of my videos. I examined the study in detail. But yeah, ultimately, I think all these benefits can be obtained if you practice similar things that are secular, like mindfulness or simply exercising or simply getting medical checkups or simply having good relationships with the people around you, or yeah, all these things, these are all secular. None of them have to be religious.
yeah,
But spirituality, it's the same religious thinking, magical thinking that leads to spirituality.
yeah, the other thing that I've never been able to understand is positive energy. The term is used so loosely. I mean, especially in terms of vastu. I mean, in that context, especially where I sit in this room and it gives me positive energy. I mean, things like cosmic energy, like I don't know, it's never made sense to me. And I think it's all some sort of placebo satisfaction that it gives people, some kind of solace. And talking about solace, I mean, you mentioned Sadhguru. I've always wondered how these sort of demigods have such cult following. And I'm sure you have researched a lot, or probably at least read some of their cults, or met people who are in the cult or whatever. I always wondered how they have such large following. And do you think there is something common between the Sri Sri Ravi Shankars and the Sadgurus and the Amritanandamais and Brahma Kumaris and all these guys? Is there something that they are doing right in gathering all these followers?
I I don't think so, because first I'll talk about what I feel leads people to believe these such people. I think so. People might experience some good feeling or benefit from some activity. Like, for example, Sadhguru holds an annual event every Shivratri, where there's a lot of music and dancing and all that. Of course, dancing and music fills your bloodstream with endorphins and you end up feeling good. If you have pain in some part, those endorphins will help you not feel pain. And people might experience some good experience in this manner. Maybe it might even be some meditation session with a lot of people. So uh, this community experience, it's all something very positive for people. And when they have a lot of people believing or sharing beliefs that they believe, it feels really good. And quite often, once once you have a good enough number, those people will keep coming back for more and maybe bring more people with them, and the number just keeps growing. And I think that's how all these um, cults kind of develop. To be honest, there is nothing positive that they actually get that they can't get elsewhere. Uh, What people like Sadhguru, Sri, and all these people do is they have products. They actually have sales. They actually have businesses uh, where the money they make out of these businesses are not taxed because they're a religious group, and uh, I think having more people in their cult only benefits them, only grows their business. And I think, of course, all these people in the garb of spirituality, or the people you mentioned in the garb of spirituality, what they have are businesses that benefit from these huge numbers of customers. And the income is just not taxed. And I think I answered everything you asked.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about Shivratri, I think you brought it up. My first, tryst with Sadhguru's tweets happened during one of those Shivratri moments. And, I have the tweet right in front of me. It says, Mahashivratri, quote, sorry, Mahashivratri, not of religion or beliefs, not of race or nation, a night in which planetary positions cause a natural energy upsurge in the human system, a cosmic phenomenon with a universal impact. Experience this consciously. No, I read that and I'm like, what is he even trying to say? I mean, he's using words like cosmic phenomenon, universal impact, planetary positions. And this was, I think, 2020, 2021, around that time, when YouTube actually had likes versus dislikes. I think they turned it off for some reason. And I was going through his videos on YouTube, all similar stuff. And I see the likes versus dislike ratio. It was crazy. So it was something around 16K likes versus 35 dislikes or something like that. And I began to think, how are people, okay with such stuff? Like, why are people putting up with such things? Um, Again, common sense has different meanings for different people, but in my opinion, someone with a little bit of common sense will not believe this. I mean, I'm sure he has said way many more things than this, which you clearly debunk in a lot of your videos. But why do you think people don't question it? Like, I see people asking him things like, "What is the best form of workout?" Like, why will you ask someone like that? I mean, why don't you go to a nutritionist or a physical trainer? And he gets a lot of questions about life, which he answers in a very neither here nor
Profound,
there kind
pseudo
of.
profound way.
Yeah, and uh, I I mean, we all have learned this in school that you can't fool many people for a long time or something along those lines, right? So, how are they doing it? Like, why do you think it's working for them?
So the first thing is they say things, only things that are vague. They'll never say anything specific that you can hold them to. That you can show that the statement is wrong. If it's vague enough, in some sense, it can be shown to be right.
I mean,
So,
taking an example of this tweet, right? Planetary positions cause a natural energy upsurge. Like what?
yeah, some statements are specific and are clearly wrong. Those are the ones I debunk on my channel also. Now, this particular thing, so people who go to that Shivratri thing event will actually feel good. But instead of realizing that it's the endorphins in your blood that are making you feel energized or good or whatever, they'll think of this thing that Sadhguru said about cosmic energies and whatever and think that that's true. Whereas the fact is, and there is the fact is that he's saying all this with zero basis, zero evidence backing any of this up. And if you like, what exactly is cosmic energy? There's no answer to all that. So, if if we look at how science works or how things work in in this world, none of it points to whatever he said. Yet people will believe because what they experience is just the energized state, that feeling, feel good feeling. So they'll say that they'll think that what he's saying makes sense. And your there is a saying that you can't feel many people for a long time, but I am not sure that's right, that's correct. After seeing all these people, you clearly can fool a lot of people for a long time. Um, and the reason why he people ask him all these questions about life and all that, and sometimes even working out and all that, is because he's given this impression that he's this knowledgeable guru. And there was this many centuries ago in India, there was this tradition of gurus, sitting under a tree, sitting in front of a bunch of students and talking to them. And it made sense back when experience was the only source of knowledge. Now it doesn't. But he still tries to, you know, bring that aura of gurus talking to shishyas. And, in that setting, they just ask anything and everything. They ask questions about Bhagyan, about life. And he'll say answers that the thing is, people have heard so many profound sounding answers from him that literally anything he says sounds profound to them. And I've actually made fun of them. If you look at it most skeptically, what he's saying sounds like word salad, just a bunch of really big words strung together without any sense. But to people who actually believe in the ideas he says, to them it'll sound like something meaningful, something profound, and that's what he rides on, this sentiment of people. And if you look at things he says about diet advice or exercise advice, he actually tells people not to go to a gym. That doesn't make sense. Not to do weights, not to lift weights. Does it, in what world does that make sense? We've got tons, countless evidence on the benefits of weight training. How does he say that? So you can actually, like, people who actually know the facts can see through his bullshit right away. But the sad thing is that there are so many people who don't know the facts that he can gain an audience easily. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's what happens.
I spoke to a few people who consistently share the shorts that he posts on YouTube or Instagram, who reshare in their stories. And I spoke to them and I was like, uh, are you a follower? And the consistent answer that I got was, I'm not a follower, but whatever he says kind of makes sense. That's
Yeah,
been the most consistent answer that I've got. And some of them have said that he has a good voice, he has a very neutral accent. It's kind of like white noise
neutral.
for them. Some of them have said that. But this whole thing called inner engineering, the product, like you said, that they sell, right? Um, I think in one of his interviews, someone asked him like, "What does it do?" And his answer was, so many people are coming back to it. So many people have benefited from it. They are ready to pay, a ridiculous amount of money for that. So it seems to work, but I don't know what exactly it is. Uh, do you have any idea
So
what it is?
that is fallacious reasoning right there. You're arguing based on the popularity of an idea, saying that an idea is true because of its popularity. But yeah, that's not why something actually is true or works. It should be on the basis of evidence. Because if we don't have that evidence, there might be something might be popular for a lot of reasons. It might be popular among a lot of people simply because they don't know any better. It might be popular because they've already been fed a lot of ideas right from their childhood, their religion or whatever, that when they hear other people saying things that sound true or in the context of everything else they've heard and experienced, it'll make sense to them. So, among such people, obviously it's going to be very popular. But that's no reason to think that it's true or it works.
Yeah, that is so true, and that's been one of my biggest criticisms with the religious texts is that it's not simple. It's why is it so complicated to understand? Why or and when I say that, the the common argument that I get back is that you have not reached that level of. But I am such a first principles guy, and I'm like, why can't you just make it simple enough to understand? And yeah, and the other thing that I've also noticed is that scientists evolve. Science evolves, and a lot of the times things that were true in the 1970s are not true anymore because we have some other proof that is countering it. But not for once have I uh, heard any of these demigods or gurus take back their statement saying that, hey, I was wrong and this is the correct version, which is, I mean, we are all humans, right? And humans make mistakes, and how can they be so perfect? I mean, I've always wondered that.
Yeah, he kind of markets himself as a perfect person, an incarnation of God, as a kind of demigod. You said it yourself. So, I think part of how he markets himself is by not being wrong about anything. And one thing you said a while back about science changing or something that wasn't true or something that was true in the 70s becoming not true now. It's like this, okay? There are facts and then there are theories. The facts will never become untrue. The evidence, facts slash evidence, whatever, will never become untrue. Whatever facts we've seen so far, we'll only add more evidence, more things we see, things we understand to that list of facts. Now, based on these facts, you have theories. You have theories like Newton's laws or Einstein's relativity that uh, try and explain why the facts are this way. They can only make such theories on the basis of facts they've seen till that date. In future, if a new fact comes along and gets added to this list, this theory might have to get updated, might change completely. That's how science improves. The facts don't change. The theories might change or improve or upgrade based on what we've learned. And all this comes with the assumption that hey, we're all humans, we make mistakes. Whenever we do make mistake, let's admit it and learn out of that mistake. But if you are an incarnation of God, you're not going to make a mistake, right? So that's why they hold on to, they never take back anything they say. They'll always justify something. They'll always justify their words or what their religious ideas tell them. All these things they'll justify, they'll rationalize in the context of what we do know today. So you'll never see them saying it's wrong. Yeah,
Yeah, and I feel
that's
like
one.
it's easy for them to justify because the statement that they started off with was vague in itself, right? So it's so easy
Yeah,
to
yeah.
justify because nobody got it in the
It's
first
easy
place.
to justify. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Now, talking about pseudoscience a little bit more, this is the time of social media. We have so many ways of communicating, and that also brings us a few bad apples, right? Pseudoscience is one. And then the other thing is, how great India was. Things that, hey, we had aeroplanes, we had this, we had that. Not much of evidence because, I mean, we were not good writers, right? We were not great in documenting. And I had this conversation with Krish Ashok as well, where, the whole fact that the Vedas and all these literary masterpieces got transferred orally in itself is a miracle. Um, but uh, but we usually talk about. I mean, also there is a slight angle of nationalism as well that is coming along. That India was great and whatnot. It had significant advancement in science, which is probably true because we were one of the great civilizations. Countries like the US didn't even exist when we existed, but uh, when we are propagating it, saying that we had this, we had that, other than getting a certain sense of validation, uh, is there any significance? Like, what if it was great? Right? It,
Yeah,
what
it's
is your take
only
on that?
validation, dude. It's only validation because I think there's a huge section of society in India who mainly mainly the right wing who are insecure, who have an inferiority complex that when they look at books or study about the inventors of things or the great discoverers of or the where ideas came from, it's always Europe or the West or something. So there is an inferiority within them that no such things really came out of India. When that's not true, there's a lot of really good science that came out of India. What they do is they try to fill that void of insecurity with lies. That's where things like Vimanas come from. Vimanas are apparently flying machines from ancient India that apparently those travelers could use to fly between like regions or whatever. Even fly to space. Flying is not really a thing in space because there's no air, you can't fly through anything.
Okay.
But that's the understanding that these people have, so they'll obviously say fly. You can only propel through space. But uh, Vimanas are based in just one book that came out in early 1900s that claims its origins are from the Vedas or from ancient India. That we actually it talks about things like, hey, we actually had uh, this kind of technology back then, and it talks about the uniform of pilots. Like, what scientific work, instead of talking about the physics of flight or how a machine actually gets in the air, instead of talking about all that, it talks about what a pilot should wear, what passengers should eat, what what protocol should be like. What in what world would you believe these things? So it seems to me, although I have no way of proving it, it seems to me that this was made up by someone who saw the protocols or uniforms of pilots after flight was invented and we had commercial flights in the early 1900s. Someone saw that and wrote all this in a book. But this person who wrote it doesn't know anything about the physics of flight, about Bernoulli's principle and all that. So none of that is there in the book. Instead, what you have in the book are these really lame things. So it's all pseudoscience ideas like those, but the reason many people believe it is because it's not all that glamorous to say, hey, we came up with the number system or the Pythagoras theorem before Pythagoras. None of that is all that enticing in their minds. But to think that we could fly back then is a glamorous idea. And when you see any idea, any empirical claim like this, there has to be a cause to have an effect. There has to be a mechanism that leads to the effect. In physics, airplanes can only fly because their wings are shaped in that way and they control the flow of air in a specific manner that gives them lift. If you have pseudoscience like this, all you need is the effect. You don't need any cause, you don't need any mechanism. So, yeah, if you combine glamour with this inferiority complex and this absence of the need for a cause, and you have shit like the Vimanas. There are a lot of other things that came out around the same time. Things like Vedic maths claims its origins are from the Vedas. Uh, Things like was one more thing.
Yoga. I mean, yoga was is a
Uh,
fairly recent thing. It was like Mysore.
I think modern yoga, many elements in yoga are a fairly recent thing, and it's all pseudo scientific. But I think the philosophy of yoga was there a while back. I think I should research on this a
Mhm.
little more before I talk about it. But there was one more thing I can't remember right now.
Mm.
But yeah, it's all these things that lead to ideas like
Right.
this.
I mean, you mentioned about you mentioned about alternative medicine and how it actually causes harm to people. Like, someone goes into a quack, or someone who's not professionally qualified. But when it comes to pseudoscience and things like this, right, claims, other than dinner table discussions of about how great India was, does it actually cause harm, or I mean,
Definitely.
Mm. uh,
Uh, the harm is in the immediate harm is from things like alternative medicine, like you
mm,
said.
yeah,
But even ideas like uh, Vimanas or Vastu or all astrology or whatever pseudoscience that people believe in, I think that kind of impacts their scientific temper. They don't look at things in a rational scientific manner. And when you already have such an approach in your thought process, you're more prone to being scammed, being falling into actual harm like alternative medicine. So, in my opinion, so I always say, okay, it's like a soil on which these plants grow. These plants represent specific ideas of pseudoscience. One plant might be Vermanas, one plant might be Vastu or whatever. You can't just pluck out these plants. That's useless. You have to target the entire base soil to prevent any new such ideas from coming out.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that is so true, because I think talking about alternative medicine, there are some really weird practices like astral projection and things like that, where people have actually lost their lives, and it's been such a
Tell
sad
me
case.
about this. I actually don't know.
Yeah, astral projection. So there was a case in Kerala. A guy murdered his parents, and he murdered because some quack or some guy had told that, you should murder your parents because he was in debt or whatever. And then if you murder your parents, then they are going to come back to life in a few days. So he murdered them. Both of them were professors. Okay. So he murdered them, and then he was in the same room that his parents lay dead, and he ordered Swiggy, Zomato, and ate and all of that. And then they never came back. Yeah. So some astral projection, you should look it up. It's a weird, again, all these clan kind of rituals which actually cause harm. I think there was another case in Kerala where an astrologer said that you should go and murder someone, and then they actually did it. Uh, yeah, lots of weird cases. I mean, again, these are all isolated, does not impact the majority of people who are religious. Again, we have to add that caveat as well. But these are, like you said, in that soil, some plants like these may grow and they may cause harm to lives. Um, but yeah, you mentioned about Pythagoras theorem and all of that. I saw a recent video where you were talking about education system and textbooks, and you mentioned about NCRT, removing things like evolution, periodic table, in the name of reducing burden, and some other modules praising Indian aviation like Vimanas, and so on. So, and you mentioned earlier where it is important that we educate the next generation, and inculcate things like scientific temper and questioning and rationality. With these changes in textbooks and the education system, where is it all going, Pranav?
I don't know. It'll all. So it's very hard to tell exactly what's gonna happen in the future. Maybe 5 years down the line, it's a long time. Lot of things would have happened in that time too, and maybe we don't have all these things in textbooks at that time. But right now, I think all this is a function of who's in power, what government is in power, and the government we have right now is very pseudoscience loving, very pseudoscience promoting. In fact, we have an entire ministry for pseudoscientific medicine. So I think again, I'm not very, I cannot say this for sure, but we have education ministers who say things like evolution isn't real. So when I see red flags like that, all I can think of is what's happening to our textbooks. Where are they going? What are kids gonna learn in the future? And of course, there will be people say that there's an isolated thing. Um, uh, this has been removed here because in future in 12 they're gonna learn it again. That's not a good enough reason for me because they're removing very vital topics like evolution and periodic table. Like there's a chapter on heredity. They're keeping that, but they're removing evolution. Heredity is that chapter is way, in my opinion, it's more complex and less important compared to evolution. So it doesn't make sense for them to remove this and not that. Things like that. Like I feel from the red flags I've seen that it's not going in the right direction. And what was your question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I was asking where this is all going, and
Yeah.
and I was also speaking from personal experience where you know uh, you know a portion of my schooling was done under the Vajpayee government, and they had I went to Kendriya Vidyalaya, and they had things like Ramayana, Mahabharata. I think they also had Gautam Buddha's lessons, and we also had a Sanskrit teacher who said that the first test tube baby was Agastya Muni because he he was born in a matka or whatever. But somehow we all grew out of it. So I guess students of this generation will also figure out a way at later stages in life, I hope.
there's I think people changing on their own will depend on things like uh, what kind of exposure they get in school, in on social media, all these things.
People they hang out with.
I was, huh?
People they hang
Sorry.
out with.
Yeah, people they hang out with. I was lucky in the sense that when I was at a very impressionable age, I had exposure to all these rational thinking individuals. The state of social media currently is that uh, a young, impressionable person coming online, they wouldn't have been exposed to all these ideas in school, they wouldn't get exposure uh, on social media. I'm not sure they can think their way out of all these ideas on their own, because all thinking has to be triggered by uh, some spark, initial spark. I'm not sure where they're gonna get it from. So, like, sure, things like evolution might be there in biology in 12th, but not everyone takes biology in 12th. They, there will be a whole section of society which never gets any exposure to any evolution anywhere in their schooling. And yeah, like I'm not sure they can think their way out of this on their
Yeah,
own.
that's true because in a class of say 60, maybe the top 1% will eventually go on to mingle with that crowd who will think rationally, but then there is always going to be the next 30, 35 students who will never see that strata of society or never be able to mingle with them, and then will be in silos and have the same sort of thinking. So I think you bring up a very
Yeah.
interesting point there. Now, Pranav, before I end this podcast, I have to ask you, if the entire world change changes to atheism, if there is no religion in the world at all, do you think there will be less problems? And the reason why I'm asking this question is, there are things like afterlife, right? And things like karma that's keeping people not do things that they would have eventually, or otherwise rather. uh, so what is your thought? Like, will there be less problems and
I, I
or
think we give a little too much credit to atheism because if you had asked the same question, but you had said, if the whole world becomes skeptical, will we have less problems? I think, yeah, definitely.
that is a
But
fantastic
if
statement. Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but if it's just atheism, yeah, sure. If that atheism is a product of skepticism, yeah, sure, maybe. But some people are atheists very dogmatically. Some people may strongly hold ideas of things like communism, and they're atheist because that's another idea that gets fed into them. Or maybe I've seen people calling themselves Hindu atheists. So
Wait, what is
these
that?
people, oh, that is so apparently Indian philosophies, Hindu philosophy had some ideas of atheism within, like there was a school of philosophy that comes under Indian philosophies that believed in material things and didn't have any idea of God. So those people. But the problem is those same people will believe in other supernatural ideas like concept of soul and believe in things like rituals and traditional ideas. So they're not really skeptical atheists. They're just atheists because of some other reasons. So, yeah, if I can modify your question to if they're all skeptical, yeah, probably there'll be lesser problems in the world because some of the biggest problems in the world today arise out of people not being skeptical, people having religious ideas which leads to war and violence. Like there's a war going on right now, That's a result of religion. And yeah, so you just have to look at what's the source of beliefs that people have. Is it some dogma, some unquestioned dogma, or is it something skeptical, something that arose out of their own skeptical thinking? Yeah, that's what we have to look at. But yeah.
Yeah. So I think the broader sense of what you're saying is that even seems turns out that atheism also has layers, by the way. That is fascinating. But yeah, I mean, I think building scientific temper, not just believing the person, right? I mean, looking at the source and building scientific temper and rationality is the key to move the world forward in terms of science and technology and just betterment of lives in general.
Yep.
But well, thank you so much, Pranav, for
Yeah.
taking out
No
time.
worries.
You're really busy, I know, with scripting and all of that. I absolutely love your content, and I'll link your content in the show notes. I highly
Thank you.
recommend that people check them out. And Pranav also hosts a podcast, and I love how he asks guests very very interesting questions. One of my favorite episodes is with Krish Ashok, and have you done an episode with Abby Phillips?
Yeah,
Yeah,
my
yeah,
very
yeah.
first podcast episode was with her.
Right, right. Yeah, highly recommend people check that out. I'll link that as well in the show notes. But Pranav, you along with Meghnad, Vyom, all of you guys are doing excellent work and creating awareness, building a very nice ecosystem, a very nice society that can push us all forward. So keep up the good work, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.